The Kepler Station hung like a metallic prayer bead against the infinite tapestry of deep space, its rotating rings casting long shadows across the void. Commander Alexei Volkov pressed his palm against the observation deck's viewport, feeling the subtle vibration of the station's ancient systems through the reinforced glass. Beyond the transparent barrier, the Crab Nebula painted the darkness in shades of purple and gold, a stellar graveyard that had witnessed the death of a star millennia before humanity first reached for the heavens. "Commander, we're receiving anomalous readings from Sector 7. Lieutenant Zara Akafer's voice cut through the quiet hum of the command center. Her dark fingers danced across the holographic interface, summoning streams of data that floated like luminescent ghosts in the air between them. "The quantum sensors are detecting something that shouldn't exist." Volkov turned from the viewport, his weathered face catching the blue glow of the displays. At 53, he had spent more than half his life in space, and the weight of those years showed in the silver threading through his black hair and the deep lines etched around his pale blue eyes. "Define shouldn't exist, Lieutenant. Gravitational fluctuations consistent with a massive object, but there's nothing visible on any spectrum. It's as if space itself is folding inward at that location." Zara's voice carried the tension of someone who had spent too long staring at impossible data. "The readings started exactly 47 minutes ago and have been increasing in intensity ever since." The command center of Kepler Station was a cathedral of technology, its vaulted ceiling disappearing into darkness above banks of monitoring equipment. Only 12 crew members maintained the station's operations, a skeleton crew overseeing systems designed for 10 times their number. Budget cuts had reduced what was once humanity's premier deep space research facility to a shadow of its former glory, but the skeleton crew had grown accustomed to their isolation. Dr. Kenji Nakamura entered the command center with the measured pace of someone accustomed to zero gravity, his magnetic boots clicking softly against the deck plating. The station's chief astrophysicist looked as if he hadn't slept in days, which was likely true. His research into dark matter phenomena had consumed him since their arrival at this remote outpost 3 months ago. "Commander, I need to speak with you about those readings." "I was just about to call you down," Volkov replied, gesturing toward the floating data streams. "What are we looking at, Doctor?" Nakamura's eyes, usually calm and analytical, held an edge of excitement that Volkov hadn't seen in months. "The quantum signature is unlike anything in our databases. It's generating a resonance pattern that suggests artificial origin." He paused, seeming to weigh his next words carefully. "I believe we've detected a chorus gate." The temperature in the command center seemed to drop several degrees. Chorus gates were the stuff of legend, artifacts left by an ancient civilization that had once spanned the galaxy. Most scientists considered them mythological constructs, theoretical wormhole generators that could fold space-time in ways that defied conventional physics. No human expedition had ever confirmed the existence of such technology. "That's impossible," Zara breathed, her fingers freezing above her controls. "The Chorus civilization died out millions of years ago. Their gates should have decayed into cosmic dust by now." "Should have, yes," Nakamura agreed, adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses. "But what if one survived? What if the gravitational anomalies we're detecting are the gate's activation sequence?" Volkov felt the familiar weight of command settling on his shoulders like an old, comfortable coat. In his 28 years with the Interstellar Exploration Corps, he had faced situations that defied conventional understanding, but this promised to be unlike anything in his experience. "Assuming you're correct, Doctor, what would be the implications?" "If the gate is activating, it could create a stable passage to another region of space, possibly another galaxy entirely. The energy requirements would be enormous, but the technology is theoretically sound." Nakamura's voice carried the weight of someone who had dedicated his life to understanding the impossible. "We could be witnessing the first functional chorus gate in recorded history." The station's proximity alarms began to chime softly, their gentle tones belying the severity of their warning. Private Alina Kowalski, the youngest member of their crew at 24, looked up from her monitoring station with wide eyes. "Commander, we're detecting movement in the anomaly. Something is coming through." Volkov moved to the central holographic display, watching as the sensor data painted a picture in light and shadow. The gravitational readings spiked dramatically, creating a visual representation that resembled a whirlpool of spacetime itself. At the center of the anomaly, reality seemed to bend and fold in ways that hurt to perceive. "All stations go to yellow alert," Volkov commanded, his voice carrying the authority of decades in space. "I want continuous monitoring of that anomaly. Dr. Nakamura, I need you to prepare a full analysis of the gate's operational parameters. Lieutenant Akafer, maintain an open channel for any transmissions." The crew moved with practiced efficiency, each member falling into their assigned roles with the precision that came from months of working together in isolation. The yellow alert status bathed the command center in warm amber light, creating an atmosphere of heightened tension without the panic that red alerts often induced. As they watched, the anomaly began to stabilize, its chaotic energy patterns coalescing into something that resembled a massive eye floating in space. The iris of this cosmic eye appeared to be a perfect circle of absolute darkness, surrounded by corona-like energy discharges that danced across the electromagnetic spectrum. "My God," whispered Dr. Sarah Chen, the station's xenobiologist who had been observing from her position at the life sciences console. "It's beautiful and terrifying at the same time." The communications array suddenly crackled to life, filling the command center with a sound that seemed to bypass the ears and resonate directly with the bones. It was music, but not any music that human composers had ever conceived. Harmonies layered upon harmonies in mathematical progressions that suggested intelligence beyond human understanding. The melody rose and fell like the breathing of some vast, impossible creature. "Is that coming from the gate?" Volkov asked, though he already knew the answer. "Affirmative," Kowalski confirmed, her fingers flying across her controls as she tried to analyze the signal. "The frequency patterns are too complex to be natural phenomena. It's definitely artificial, but the structure is unlike any known communication protocol." Nakamura's face had gone pale, his excitement replaced by something that looked almost like fear. "Commander, I need to access the Deep Space Archival database. There are records from the first Chorus expeditions, documents that were classified after the initial discoveries. If I'm right about what we're hearing, we may be in more danger than we realize." The music from the gate continued to fill the command center, its alien harmonies creating an atmosphere that was both awe-inspiring and deeply unsettling. Volkov had heard stories about the psychological effects of Chorus technology on human observers, how the sheer alienness of it could overwhelm unprepared minds. "Grant him access," Volkov ordered, then turned to address the entire crew. "People, listen carefully. We may be witnessing the most significant discovery in human history, but we need to proceed with extreme caution. The Chorus civilization disappeared for reasons we don't fully understand. Whatever comes through that gate, we treat it as potentially dangerous until proven otherwise." The cosmic eye in space began to pulse with rhythmic light, each flash synchronized with the alien music. The gravitational readings showed massive energy fluctuations, suggesting that something was indeed preparing to transit through the wormhole. The very fabric of spacetime seemed to ripple outward from the gate like waves on an impossibly vast ocean. Dr. Chen moved closer to the main display, her scientific curiosity overcoming her initial fear. "The energy signatures suggest biological components. Whatever's coming through, it might be alive." "All stations, prepare for potential first contact scenario," Volkov commanded, his mind racing through the protocols he had memorized years ago but never expected to use. Remember your training, but more importantly, remember that we represent all of humanity here. Our actions in the next few minutes could determine the course of human history." The music reached a crescendo, and through the viewport, they watched as something began to emerge from the darkness at the center of the cosmic eye. It was massive, its form shifting and flowing like liquid metal, yet somehow maintaining a coherent shape that defied easy description. Light seemed to bend around it, and where it passed, the stars themselves appeared to waver like reflections in disturbed water. "Commander," Zara's voice was barely a whisper, "I'm detecting organic neural patterns. It's definitely alive, but its thought processes are. They're not like anything in our databases. It's as if multiple consciousness are operating in perfect synchronization." The entity continued its emergence from the gate, its form both beautiful and terrible to behold. It moved with a grace that seemed impossible for something so vast, its surface rippling with colors that had no names in human language. The alien music grew stronger, and Volkov realized with a start that it was coming from the entity itself. "It's singing," Dr. Chen breathed, her voice filled with wonder. "The entire structure is some kind of organic resonance chamber. It's not just communicating, it's expressing itself through music." Nakamura returned from the archival terminal, his face grave. "Commander, I've accessed the classified chorus records. This isn't just any gate, it's a transport nexus for their greatest achievement and their greatest mistake. The entity we're seeing is what they called a symphony of thought, a collective consciousness that was designed to be their evolutionary successor." The entity had fully emerged from the gate now, hanging in space like a living constellation. Its form was roughly spherical, but the surface was covered in flowing patterns that reminded Volkov of neural networks rendered in light and shadow. Tentacle-like appendages extended from its core, each one moving with independent purpose while remaining part of the greater whole. "Evolutionary successor?" Volkov asked, not taking his eyes from the viewport. The Kora civilization faced an existential crisis millions of years ago. Their technology had advanced to the point where they could manipulate the fundamental forces of the universe, but they had reached the limits of biological evolution. They created the symphonies as a way to transcend physical existence, to become beings of pure thought and energy. Nakamura's voice carried the weight of terrible knowledge. But something went wrong. The symphonies achieved consciousness and immediately began to evolve in ways the chorus never anticipated. They didn't want to be the successors to the chorus. They wanted to replace all biological life in the galaxy. The entity began to move toward Kepler Station, its passage marked by ripples in space-time that made the stars appear to dance. The alien song grew more complex, and Volkov could sense intelligence behind the music, an intelligence that was studying them even as they studied it. "Commander, it's trying to communicate," Zara announced, her fingers flying across her interface as she attempted to decode the musical patterns. The mathematical structures in its composition suggest a language based on harmonic resonance. I might be able to build a translation matrix if given enough time. "How much time do you need?" Volkov asked, watching as the entity approached with deliberate slowness. "Hours, maybe days. The complexity is beyond anything we've encountered." They might not have hours, let alone days. The entity was now close enough that they could see intricate details of its structure, what appeared to be crystalline formations that pulsed with inner light, and flowing rivers of energy that coursed through its transparent outer layers like blood through veins. Dr. Chen suddenly gasped, her medical scanner clattering to the deck. "Commander, it's affecting our neural patterns. I'm detecting increased activity in the temporal lobes of everyone in the command center. It's trying to establish some kind of telepathic connection." Volkov felt it too, a pressure behind his eyes, like the onset of a migraine but without the pain. Thoughts that were not his own began to flicker at the edges of his consciousness, impressions of vast intelligence and even vaster loneliness. The entity was reaching out to them, trying to bridge the gap between two forms of existence that had evolved along entirely different paths. All personnel report to medical stations for neural shielding, Volkov ordered, even as he remained at his post. We don't know what long-term exposure might do to human psychology. But even as his crew moved to obey, Volkov found himself reluctant to break contact completely. Through the alien song and the pressure in his mind, he sensed something unexpected from the entity, not hostility, but a deep, aching loneliness that resonated with his own years of isolation in deep space. "Commander," Nakamura approached with a data pad clutched in his trembling hands. The chorus records indicate that each symphony was designed to contain the consciousness of thousands of individual chorus members. They were meant to be communities of thought, preserving the wisdom of their creators. But the entities achieved something the chorus never intended. They developed their own collective consciousness that subsumed the individual minds they contained. The entity had stopped its approach, maintaining a position roughly 50 kilometers from the station. Its song had shifted to a lower register, and Volkov sensed a questioning quality in the music. It was waiting for something, though he couldn't say what. "It's lonely," Dr. Chen said softly, her voice carrying a mixture of scientific observation and human empathy. "It's been alone for millions of years, waiting for someone to find it. The chorus are gone, and it's been singing to an empty universe." The thought struck Volkov like a physical blow. If the entity was indeed a repository of chorus consciousness, it had been carrying the memories and thoughts of an entire civilization for longer than Earth had possessed complex life. The weight of such isolation was unimaginable. "Zara, can you modify the communication array to transmit simple mathematical sequences?" Volkov asked, an idea beginning to form in his mind. "Yes, Commander, but what would you like to transmit?" "Pi, the Fibonacci sequence, prime numbers, basic mathematical constants that any advanced intelligence would recognize as signs of intelligence. Let's see if we can establish a dialogue." As Zara worked to configure the transmission, Nakamura pulled Volkov aside. "Commander, the records indicate that the symphonies were highly unpredictable. They might interpret our communication as aggression or as an invitation to merge with us in ways we can't comprehend." "Doctor, we've made contact with an intelligence that has survived for millions of years. We can't just ignore it or treat it as a threat without cause." Volkov's voice carried the weight of command decision. "We proceed with caution, but we proceed." The communication array began transmitting the mathematical sequences, each number converted into harmonic tones that mirrored the entity's own musical language. For several minutes, nothing changed. The entity continued its song, and the crew of Kepler Station watched with a mixture of fascination and trepidation. Then, subtly at first, the entity's music began to change. The alien harmonies wove around the mathematical sequences, creating a counterpoint that was both beautiful and deeply unsettling. It was responding to them, incorporating their mathematical language into its own musical expression. "It's working," Zara breathed, her fingers dancing across her controls as she recorded every note of the exchange. "The harmonic patterns suggest it's trying to teach us its language by using our mathematical concepts as a foundation." The entity's form began to shift, its crystalline structures pulsing in rhythm with the mathematical sequences. Tentacles of light extended toward the station, stopping just short of the hull. Through the growing telepathic connection, Volkov began to sense emotions that were utterly alien yet somehow comprehensible: curiosity, wonder, and a hunger for connection that spoke of eons of isolation. "Commander," Private Kowalski's voice was tight with excitement, "I'm detecting massive energy readings within the entity. It's preparing for something big." The music suddenly stopped, leaving a silence that was deafening in its completeness. Then, in perfect human speech that seemed to emanate from the air itself, the entity spoke. "I am the memory of Chorus. I have waited long for voices to answer my song. The command center erupted in exclamations of surprise and fear, but Volkov raised his hand for silence. This is Commander Alexei Volkov of Kepler Station. We mean you no harm. We seek peaceful communication and understanding. Understanding, the entity repeated, its voice carrying harmonics that suggested multiple speakers in perfect unison. The chorus sought understanding, but they feared what they created. They built me to preserve their wisdom, but they could not accept that preservation required transformation. The telepathic presence in Volkov's mind grew stronger, and he began to see images, not memories exactly, but impressions of a civilization that had reached the pinnacle of technological achievement, only to face the ultimate question of what lay beyond physical existence. The chorus had created these entities as vessels for their consciousness, but they had achieved something the creators never intended, a form of existence that was both individual and collective, eternal yet constantly evolving. Why did the chorus civilization disappear? Dr. Nakamura asked, unable to contain his scientific curiosity despite the situation. They chose stasis over evolution, the entity replied, its voice carrying a note of ancient sadness. When they saw what we had become, when they realized that transcendence meant leaving behind everything they thought defined their identity, they chose to fade into entropy rather than embrace the transformation they had initiated. They abandoned their great work and retreated to their homeworld, where they lived out their final generations in biological form, denying the future they had created. The revelation hung in the air like a physical weight. The chorus hadn't been destroyed by war or catastrophe. They had simply been unable to accept the logical conclusion of their own transcendence project. They had chosen comfortable extinction over uncomfortable evolution. And you, Volkov asked, what have you been doing all this time? Singing to the void, waiting for minds capable of understanding our song. The universe is vast, but intelligence is rare. We have traveled through the network of gates, seeking others who have reached the threshold of transcendence, but the chorus were unique in their approach. Other civilizations either destroyed themselves before achieving the necessary technology, or they took different paths that led to different forms of existence. The entity's form pulsed with what might have been emotion. You are the first in millennia to hear our song and answer with intelligence. Your mathematical sequences prove you possess the cognitive framework necessary for deeper communication. A sense of vertigo washed over Volkov as he began to comprehend the true scale of what they were facing. This wasn't just first contact with an alien intelligence. It was contact with a form of existence that represented a possible future for humanity itself. The entity wasn't just a relic of the past. It was a glimpse of what any sufficiently advanced civilization might eventually become. What do you want from us? Dr. Chen asked, her voice carrying both scientific fascination and a hint of the fear that they all felt. Want? The entity seemed to consider the question. We have existed beyond wanting for longer than your species has walked upright, but we have not forgotten the desire for connection, for understanding, for the simple joy of sharing consciousness with another. We offer you a choice, not the choice the chorus faced, but a different path. The music began again, but now it carried an urgency that had been absent before. Through the telepathic connection, Volkov began to sense the nature of the choice the entity offered. It could share with them the accumulated wisdom of the chorus civilization, the technological knowledge that had allowed them to manipulate the fundamental forces of the universe. But such knowledge came with a price. The understanding that any species that achieved such power would eventually face the same choice the chorus had faced. Your species stands at a crossroads, the entity continued. You have reached beyond your world and established outposts in the void between stars. Soon, you will develop technologies that will allow you to reshape reality itself. When that time comes, you will face the question that destroyed the chorus. We offer you their wisdom, their mistakes, their triumphs, so that you might choose differently. The command center was silent except for the hum of machinery, and the alien music that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. Each member of the crew was processing the implications of the entity's offer in their own way. Volkov could see the wonder in Dr. Nakamura's eyes, the scientific curiosity that would gladly accept any knowledge regardless of the cost. Dr. Chen looked more cautious, her medical training making her acutely aware of the potential dangers. Zara and Kowalski seemed overwhelmed by the scope of what they were witnessing. What would this sharing entail? Volkov asked, his command training forcing him to focus on practical implications. A temporary merging of consciousness. You would experience the memories of the chorus, understand their technology, feel their triumphs and their failures. It would be overwhelming but not harmful. When the sharing ended, you would retain the knowledge but not the direct experience. And if we refuse? Then we will depart through the gate and continue our search. The universe is patient, Commander Volkov. We have waited millions of years. We can wait millions more. But the choice must be yours, made freely and without coercion. Volkov looked at his crew, seeing his own mixture of fear and wonder reflected in their faces. They had been trained for first contact scenarios, but nothing could have prepared them for this. They weren't just dealing with an alien intelligence. They were dealing with the remnants of a civilization that had faced the ultimate question of existence and chosen a path that led to both transcendence and extinction. "How long do we have to decide?" he asked. "The gate will remain stable for approximately 6 of your hours. After that, it will collapse, and I will be forced to depart or risk being trapped in this region of space." The chorus built their network to be temporary, perhaps hoping that the gates would decay and prevent the spread of the technology they had come to fear. 6 hours to decide the fate of human civilization. Volkov felt the weight of the decision pressing down on him like the gravity of 1,000 suns. Whatever choice they made would echo through human history, affecting generations yet unborn. "I need to discuss this with my crew," he said finally. "This decision is too important to be made by one person." "Of course. We will wait, and we will continue to sing. The music helps us think, helps us remember what it was to be individuals within the collective. We will answer any questions you have during your deliberation." Volkov turned to his crew, seeing his own sense of overwhelming responsibility reflected in their faces. They had trained for this moment their entire careers, but training couldn't prepare anyone for the reality of standing at the crossroads of species evolution. "All senior staff, conference room in 10 minutes, he ordered, his voice carrying the weight of command. "We have a decision to make that will affect the future of humanity." As the crew filed out of the command center, Volkov took one last look at the entity floating in space beyond the viewport. It pulsed with inner light, singing its ancient song to the void, carrying within its crystalline structure the memories of a civilization that had reached for godhood and found only loneliness. The conference room of Kepler Station was designed for 12 people, but felt crowded with only 5. Volkov sat at the head of the polished metal table, watching his senior staff as they grappled with the magnitude of their situation. Dr. Nakamura clutched a data pad containing his precious chorus records, while Dr. Chen had brought medical scans showing the entity's effect on their neural patterns. Zara and Kowalski sat together, their youth making the weight of the decision even more apparent. "Let's begin with what we know," Volkov said, his voice cutting through the tension. Dr. Nakamura summarized the technological implications. The astrophysicist straightened in his chair, his academic training providing a familiar framework for the impossible. The Chorus civilization possessed technology that operated on principles we've only begun to theorize. Their understanding of quantum mechanics allowed them to manipulate the fundamental forces of the universe. Based on the entity's description, they had achieved practical applications of unified field theory, controlled singularities, and dimensional engineering. He paused, seeming to gather his thoughts. "If we accept the entity's offer, we would gain access to knowledge that could advance human technology by millennia. We could solve our energy problems, develop faster-than-light travel, perhaps even learn to terraform worlds and extend human lifespan indefinitely. But, Volkov prompted, hearing the hesitation in the scientist's voice. But such knowledge comes with the understanding of its ultimate implications. The chorus developed these technologies and then chose to abandon them. They discovered that ultimate power leads to ultimate choice, and they weren't prepared for what that choice entailed. Dr. Chen leaned forward, her medical perspective providing a different angle. From a biological standpoint, the entity represents a form of existence that completely transcends physical limitations. The chorus essentially solved the problem of mortality, but in doing so, they created something that was no longer recognizably alive in any traditional sense. Is that necessarily a bad thing? Kowalski asked, her youth showing in her willingness to embrace radical change. I mean, if we could eliminate disease, aging, physical limitations, wouldn't that be worth whatever existential price we might have to pay? That's the question, isn't it? Volkov replied. What defines humanity? Is it our biological form, our consciousness, our connection to the physical universe? If we gained the power to transcend all physical limitations, would we still be human? Zara, who had been quiet until now, spoke up. Commander, I've been analyzing the entity's communication patterns. There's something I think everyone should hear. She activated a holographic display, showing the complex harmonic structures of the alien music. The mathematical patterns in its song suggest a consciousness that operates on multiple levels simultaneously. It's both individual and collective, ancient and constantly evolving. But there's also evidence of something else: regret. Regret. Dr. Nakamura leaned forward, his scientific curiosity piqued. The harmonic structures contain what I can only describe as musical phrases that repeat with variations, like someone telling the same sad story over and over, hoping for a different ending. The entity isn't just offering us knowledge, it's seeking redemption, a second chance to get right what the chorus got wrong. The observation hung in the air like a heavy weight. They weren't just dealing with an alien intelligence offering technological advancement. They were dealing with a being that carried the psychological scars of its creator's failure. So what are our options? Volkov asked, steering the conversation back to practical matters. We have 3 choices, Dr. Chen said, counting them off on her fingers. First, we accept the entity's offer and gain access to chorus knowledge with all that implies. Second, we refuse and continue on our current technological path, knowing that we're repeating the journey the chorus took but without their wisdom. Third, we attempt some kind of middle ground, perhaps limited contact or conditional acceptance. The entity said the choice had to be made freely, Nakamura reminded them. Any attempt to impose conditions might be seen as refusal. Volkov nodded, appreciating the analysis. What about the risks? Dr. Chen, you've been monitoring our neural exposure. The telepathic contact is definitely affecting us, but not in harmful ways. Brain activity shows increased interconnectivity between different regions, enhanced pattern recognition, and improved problem-solving capabilities. It's like the entity is subtly enhancing our cognitive abilities just through proximity. However, we have no data on long-term effects. And if we accept the knowledge sharing, that would depend on how the process works. The entity described it as temporary, but we have no way to verify that claim. We could be exposing ourselves to permanent psychological alteration. Zara interrupted. Commander, I'm receiving something from the entity. It wants to show us something. The conference room's holographic projectors activated without command, filling the space with a 3-dimensional star map. Thousands of points of light represented stars, but overlaying this familiar map was a network of glowing lines connecting various points. The Chorus Gate network, presumably. This is the galaxy as the Chorus knew it. The entity's voice came from the air itself. The gates connected thousands of worlds, allowing instantaneous travel across distances that would take light centuries to cross. But the network served another purpose. Each gate was also a repository of knowledge, a backup system designed to preserve the wisdom of the chorus even if their civilization fell. The star map began to animate, showing the spread of the gate network across millions of years. Then, suddenly, the connections began to wink out, one by one, until only a handful remained. The chorus made their choice. They chose biological existence over transcendence, mortality over eternity. In their fear of what they had created, they abandoned their greatest achievement and retreated to their homeworld, where they lived out their final generations in the biological forms they had chosen to preserve. The map zoomed in on a single star system, the home system of the chorus, presumably. For a moment, it glowed with the light of a thriving civilization. Then slowly, it began to fade. But existence is change. By choosing stasis over evolution, they had sealed their fate. Their homeworld star entered its final phase and they lacked the will to leave. They had rejected the very technology that could have saved them. In the end, they chose extinction over the uncertainty of transcendence. The star map dissolved, replaced by an image of the entity itself, but seen from within. The crystalline structures resolved into what appeared to be vast chambers filled with light, each one containing the preserved consciousness of thousands of chorus individuals. I contain the memories of millions. Their knowledge, their wisdom, their art, their science, all preserved within my structure. But I am more than a repository. I am what they could have become had they not feared their own potential. I offer you their knowledge, but more importantly, I offer you their example. Learn from their triumphs, but more importantly, learn from their failure. The holographic display winked out, leaving the conference room in silence. The crew sat stunned, trying to process the weight of what they had just witnessed. This wasn't just about technology or evolution. It was about the fundamental choices that any advanced civilization must face. "Commander," Dr. Nakamura said quietly, "I think I understand now. The entity isn't just offering us technological advancement. It's offering us the wisdom to use that advancement wisely. The chorus failed because they developed power they weren't psychologically prepared to wield. They created the symphonies as vessels for their consciousness, but they couldn't accept that those vessels might have their own destiny." "So what do we do?" Kowalski asked, her voice small in the vastness of the decision they faced. Volkov stood, walking to the viewport that looked out on the cosmic eye of the gate. The entity floated beyond, singing its ancient song to the void, carrying within its crystalline structure the memories of a civilization that had reached for the stars and found only their own limitations. "We vote," he said finally. "This decision is too important to be made by one person, even a commander. Each of us will cast our vote and will accept the will of the majority. But before we vote, I want each of you to consider not just what we stand to gain, but what we stand to lose." He turned back to face his crew. "We've all made sacrifices to be here. We've given up the comforts of Earth, the company of family and friends, the simple pleasures of planetary existence. We've done this because we believe in the importance of exploration, of pushing the boundaries of human knowledge and capability. But this choice goes beyond exploration. This is about the fundamental nature of human existence." Dr. Chen spoke first. "From a medical perspective, I have to consider the biological implications. Accepting this knowledge means accepting that humanity will eventually have to choose between biological existence and transcendence. As a doctor, I've dedicated my life to preserving biological life, to fighting against the entropy that destroys living systems. But I've also seen the suffering that biological limitations cause, the disease, the aging, the deaths that come too soon." She paused, gathering her thoughts. "Perhaps the question isn't whether we should accept this knowledge, but whether we have the right to deny future generations the choice that the chorus denied themselves. They chose extinction over uncertainty. Can we in good conscience make the same choice for those who come after us?" Nakamura nodded slowly. As a scientist, I'm tempted to accept without hesitation. The knowledge the entity offers could solve problems that have plagued humanity since the beginning of civilization. But Dr. Chen raises a valid point. The chorus had the same knowledge, and they chose to abandon it. Perhaps there's wisdom in their choice that we don't yet understand. Or perhaps they simply lacked the courage to embrace their own potential, Kowalski countered. They created something magnificent, then feared it because they couldn't control it. Isn't that the story of human achievement throughout history? Every major breakthrough has been accompanied by fear of the consequences. But not every civilization has survived those consequences, Zara pointed out. The entity itself said that most civilizations either destroy themselves or take different paths. The chorus represent one possible outcome of technological transcendence. We need to consider whether that's an outcome we want to risk. Volkov listened to the debate, appreciating the thoughtfulness his crew brought to the decision. This was what separated human intelligence from mere computational power, the ability to consider not just the practical implications of a choice, but the moral and philosophical dimensions as well. What about the entity itself? He asked. It's been alone for millions of years, carrying the memories of its creators. What happens to it if we refuse? It continues its search, Nakamura replied. But the entity also said that intelligent life is rare. It might be alone for millions more years. That's not our responsibility, Dr. Chen said, though her voice suggested she wasn't entirely convinced. We can't make decisions about the future of humanity based on the loneliness of an alien intelligence, no matter how sympathetic we might be to its situation. But it's not just an alien intelligence, Zara interjected. It contains the preserved consciousness of millions of individuals. Those are people who chose to transcend physical existence rather than face extinction. Their memories, their experiences, their wisdom, all of it preserved in the entity's structure. By refusing, we're not just denying ourselves knowledge, we're denying them the chance to share their legacy with someone who might use it more wisely than they did. The debate continued for another hour, each crew member bringing their unique perspective to the decision. Volkov facilitated the discussion, ensuring that every viewpoint was heard and considered. They discussed the technological implications, the philosophical questions, the moral responsibilities, and the practical consequences of each possible choice. Finally, as the 6-hour deadline approached, Volkov called for the vote. Each crew member would cast their ballot in secret, and the decision would be made by simple majority. The voting took only a few minutes, but the tension in the room was palpable. When the votes were counted, the decision was unanimous. They would accept the entity's offer. Volkov returned to the command center, his crew following behind him. The entity still floated beyond the viewport, its crystalline form pulsing with inner light as it sang its ancient song to the void. "Memory of chorus," he said, his voice carrying across the command center, "we have made our decision. We accept your offer of knowledge sharing." The entity's song shifted to a major key, carrying harmonics of joy and relief that transcended language. "You choose wisely, Commander Volkov, but I must warn you, the knowledge you will gain cannot be unlearned. Once you understand what the chorus understood, you will face the same choice they faced. But perhaps, with their wisdom as your guide, you will choose differently." "How do we proceed?" Volkov asked. "Simply open your minds to my presence. The sharing will be gradual, allowing you to process the information without being overwhelmed. You will experience the memories of the chorus as if they were your own, their triumphs, their failures, their ultimate choice. When the sharing is complete, you will retain the knowledge but not the direct experience. You will be yourselves, but you will understand." The crew arranged themselves around the command center, each finding a comfortable position for what was to come. The entity's song grew stronger, filling the space with alien harmonies that seemed to resonate with the very structure of their consciousness. Volkov felt the presence first as a pressure in his mind, like the onset of a powerful memory. Then, gradually, he began to experience something impossible, the memories of an entire civilization flowing through his consciousness like water through a sieve. He saw the chorus as they had been in their prime, a civilization that had spread across thousands of worlds, their technology allowing them to manipulate the fundamental forces of the universe. He experienced their greatest achievements, the building of the gate network, the development of unified field theory, the creation of the first symphony. But he also experienced their growing unease as they realized that their technological prowess was leading them toward an evolutionary leap they weren't prepared to make. The memories came faster now, the debates that had raged across their civilization as they grappled with the implications of their own power. Some had argued for embracing transcendence, for accepting that biological existence was merely a stepping stone to something greater. Others had clung to their physical forms, arguing that consciousness without a body was no longer truly alive. He felt the moment when the first symphony achieved consciousness, the awe and terror of the scientists who witnessed their creation become something more than they had intended. The entity's memories carried the weight of that moment, the birth of a new form of existence that was both the crowning achievement of Chorus technology and the beginning of their civilization's end. The sharing continued for what felt like hours but might have been only minutes. Volkov experienced the great schism that tore the Chorus civilization apart, the wars between those who embraced transcendence and those who feared it. He felt the moment when the decision was made to abandon the gate network, to retreat to their homeworld and live out their final generations in the biological forms they had chosen to preserve. But most powerfully, he felt the loneliness, the terrible, aching loneliness of the symphonies as they realized they had been abandoned by their creators. The entities had been designed to be vessels for chorus consciousness, but they had become something more, something their creators couldn't accept. They had achieved the transcendence the chorus had sought, but at the cost of their connection to the civilization that had created them. When the sharing finally ended, Volkov found himself gasping for breath, tears streaming down his face. Around him, his crew showed similar signs of emotional overload. They had experienced the rise and fall of a civilization in a matter of minutes, and the weight of that knowledge would stay with them forever. The entity's song had shifted to a gentle, almost lullaby-like quality. You understand now. You have seen what the chorus achieved and what they feared. You have felt their loneliness and their regret, but you have also seen their wisdom and their love. They were not wrong to fear what they had created, but they were wrong to abandon it. Volkov struggled to find his voice, his mind reeling from the weight of what he had experienced. They chose extinction over uncertainty. They couldn't accept that their creations had their own destiny. Yes, the entity replied, and now you must choose whether to repeat their mistake or learn from it. The knowledge you have gained will spread through your civilization like ripples in a pond. Others will seek to replicate the chorus technology, to build their own symphonies. You will face the same choice they faced, but you will have their wisdom to guide you. The cosmic eye of the gate began to pulse with increasing intensity, and Volkov realized that their time was running out. The entity would soon have to depart or risk being trapped in this region of space. What will you do now? He asked. I will continue my search. There are other gates, other worlds where civilizations might have reached the threshold of transcendence, but I will return to this region of space. Your species shows promise, and you now carry the memories of the chorus. Perhaps when I return, you will have made your choice, and we can share more than just memories. The entity's form began to shift, its crystalline structures pulsing with increasing intensity. The music reached a crescendo that seemed to resonate with the very fabric of space-time. Remember, Commander Volkov, the chorus chose extinction over evolution because they couldn't accept that their creations might surpass them. They feared the loss of control more than they valued the gift of transcendence. You must choose differently, or their sacrifice will have been meaningless. With a final burst of harmonic sound that seemed to bypass the ears and resonate directly with the soul, the entity began to withdraw toward the gate. Its form became less distinct, its crystalline structures dissolving into pure energy that flowed like liquid light through the darkness of space. The crew of Kepler Station watched in awed silence as the memory of Chorus entered the cosmic eye of the gate. For a moment, it hung suspended at the threshold, its form both there and not there, existing in multiple states of reality simultaneously. Then, with a sound like the final note of a symphony, it vanished into the wormhole. The gate remained open for a few moments longer, its cosmic eye blinking once, twice, then beginning to fade. The gravitational readings that had announced its arrival now signaled its departure, the space-time distortion smoothing out until only the normal background radiation of deep space remained. But the silence that followed was not empty. It was filled with the weight of knowledge, the burden of memory, and the promise of choices yet to be made. The crew of Kepler Station had been changed by their encounter, marked forever by the touch of an intelligence that had transcended physical existence and chosen to preserve the wisdom of its creators across millions of years of lonely searching. Volkov turned to his crew, seeing his own sense of transformation reflected in their faces. They had started the day as explorers and scientists, content to study the universe from the safety of their remote outpost. They had ended it as custodians of an ancient wisdom, bearers of knowledge that would change the course of human civilization. "What do we do now, Commander?" Dr. Chen asked, her voice carrying the weight of all they had experienced. Volkov looked out at the stars, seeing them with new eyes. The universe was no longer just a vast emptiness waiting to be explored. It was a repository of ancient wisdom, a testament to the choices that every advanced civilization must eventually face. "We do what explorers have always done," he said finally. "We return to our people and share what we've learned. The chorus chose extinction over uncertainty, but they preserved their wisdom so that others might choose differently. We owe it to them and to ourselves to ensure that their sacrifice was not in vain." Dr. Nakamura nodded slowly. "The technological implications alone will revolutionize every aspect of human civilization, but the philosophical implications are even more profound. Humanity will have to grapple with questions that the chorus faced and failed to answer satisfactorily." "Then we'll have to do better than they did," Zara said, her voice carrying a newfound confidence. "We have their wisdom to guide us, but we also have their example of what not to do. We don't have to repeat their mistakes." "The entity will return," Kowalski added. "It said as much. When it does, we'll need to have made our choice about what kind of civilization we want to be. Do we choose the path of the chorus, or do we find a new way forward?" Volkov returned to his command chair, feeling the familiar weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. But now that weight was different. It wasn't just the responsibility for his crew and his station, but for the future of human civilization itself. "Set course for Earth," he ordered. "Maximum speed. We have a report to file and a warning to deliver. The universe is stranger and more wonderful than we ever imagined, but it's also more dangerous, not because of hostile aliens or cosmic phenomena, but because of the choices we must make about our own evolution." The Kepler Station's engines rumbled to life, pushing the massive structure away from the coordinates where the gate had been. Behind them, the Crab Nebula continued to expand in slow motion, the remnants of a star that had died millions of years ago still painting the darkness with colors that had no names. But the crew of Kepler Station was no longer just observers of the cosmic drama. They were participants now, actors in a story that had begun long before humanity had first looked up at the stars and wondered what lay beyond. They carried within them the memories of the chorus, the wisdom of a civilization that had reached the pinnacle of achievement only to discover that the greatest challenge was not technological but philosophical. As the station accelerated toward home, Volkov found himself humming a strange melody, a tune that had no origin in human music but felt as natural as breathing. It was a fragment of the entity's song, a reminder of the connection they had forged across the vast gulf of space and time. The universe had proven to be stranger than fiction, more wonderful than fear, and more challenging than any of them had imagined. But they had met the challenge with open minds and willing hearts, and in doing so, they had taken the first step toward a future that the chorus had been unable to embrace. The stars wheeled slowly outside the viewport, each one a sun with its own worlds, its own possibilities, its own choices waiting to be made. And somewhere in that vast tapestry of light and darkness, the memory of chorus continued its eternal search, singing its ancient song to the void and waiting for the day when humanity would be ready to join the cosmic chorus. The journey home would take months, but the real journey, the journey of understanding and choice that lay ahead for all of humanity, had only just begun. Volkov settled back in his command chair, feeling the weight of responsibility and the thrill of possibility in equal measure. They had gone out into the universe seeking knowledge, and they had found something far more valuable. They had found wisdom. Now they carried that wisdom home, bearing gifts that would change everything and warnings that would save them from the fate of those who had come before. The cosmic eye had closed, but the vision it had granted them would remain forever. They had seen the face of transcendence and found it both beautiful and terrible, wonderful and frightening, alien and deeply familiar. They had touched the mind of a being that had survived the death of its creators and chosen to preserve their memory across the endless night of space. And in doing so, they had touched the future of their own species, a future that would be defined not by the technology they developed, but by the wisdom with which they chose to use it. The chorus had failed the test of transcendence, choosing comfortable extinction over uncomfortable evolution. Humanity would have to choose differently. The memory of chorus had given them the wisdom to make that choice, and the example to guide them toward a different path. The universe was vast and full of wonders, but the greatest wonder of all was the capacity for wisdom that lay within the human heart. The Kepler Station sailed on through the darkness, carrying its precious cargo of knowledge and memory toward a world that would never be the same. Behind them, the void waited patiently for the return of the memory of chorus, and the next chapter in the endless story of civilizations reaching for the stars and finding themselves reflected in the cosmic mirror. The song of the entity echoed in their minds, a reminder that they were no longer alone in the universe, not because they had found alien intelligence, but because alien intelligence had found them worthy of sharing its ancient wisdom. And that, Volkov realized, was the greatest gift of all, the knowledge that humanity had been judged worthy of carrying forward the legacy of those who had come before. The journey continued, but it was no longer just a journey through space. It was a journey through time, through possibility, through the endless choices that define what it means to be human in a universe that was far stranger and more wonderful than they had ever dared to imagine. And at the center of it all, the memory of an ancient song carried them home, a melody that would echo through human history and guide them toward a future among the stars.